那接下来呢，我们第四位演讲嘉宾是临床心理师 Sofia University 心理学家许亚茹博士。Dr. Xu is a transcultural program, a scholar practitioner, and an internationally psychologist. She is certified in China, licensed clinically in Taiwan and Colorado. Having been educated in 4 different countries and traveled to over 25 different corners in the world, she has a deep appreciation for diversity. Clinically, she founded a group practice in Taipei and a private practice in Denver. She sees clients, supervises doctoral learners, provides training seminars and workshops, and serves as the lead faculty for Masters of Transpersonal Psychology program at Sofia University. Her topic today is navigating existential suffering in unusual times, a psychologist's clinical observation and a personal practice. Let's welcome Dr. Xu.
谢谢您的介绍。今天非常有荣幸，也收获满满的听到各位的学者在讲天灾，然后再讲这些传染的病毒。其实在这个情况下，我们不只感受得到所有事情都在改变，随时我们周边都有很多未知数产生。那这一段期间的确会让人心里面特别的恐慌。那我今天的主讲，我想要强调的是平凡的美，怎么样在一个非常的时期当中，我们练习一些存在的修行，让我们看得见 the beauty of normalcy. Okay. As a clinical psychologist and as a woman of color, it's regular practice that I see people with depression and anxiety, as well as issues relating to their identity. But prior to COVID-19, only a minority of my clients are Asian Americans. Specifically, only a tiny little fraction are Chinese Americans. And that's really interesting. Okay, so what happened? Compare your lives for a second. Compare your lives to maybe before January of 2019, if you live in Asia, versus March of 2019, if you lived in the United States. Do you remember getting the notice, okay, where state by state, they announced states of emergency? And then we were ordered to stay at home. A bunch of things happened. Okay, traveling became extremely limited, even today. Home and work became the same space. Okay, for those of you with children who are learning from home, your home also became a school, but it also became an office. But yet, the boundaries became blurred as it still is home. If you're like me and you are taking care of a young, the boundaries further blend because now you're concerned with whether or not to have help to help you care for your very young, and how do you juggle work and life, especially with your attitude toward other people and other people's attitude towards you changed, because instead of looking at people's faces, we now only really see a mask and maybe their eyes that's filled with fatigue, some anxiety, and maybe a little bit of mistrust. Like many of you, our playground was the world. We can go anywhere we want, travel and see family from all over the place. But now our world became the World Wide Web. Everything took place online. I don't know if you remember if this was your experience, but it was mine. The very last time I went to a supermarket and shopped before the stay-at-home order initially formally took place. The aisles looked really disorganized. People looked frantic. So many things were not available. People's footsteps were different. It almost seemed like the stores were also darker, and there's just fear on people's faces. But in particular, there's a look that it's different that seemed to be reserved for people who look like you and I, a Chinese face. So in May of 2019, the World Health Organization, the UN Secretary General wanted people to be aware of how COVID seemed to unleash racial incidents, particularly towards Asian Americans. And within, I think, something like 8 short weeks, they were reported over 1,800 racialized hate incidents toward Chinese Americans or Asian Americans. That's very alarming. And the Pew survey also found out that about 40 to 50% of Asian Americans are concerned, and afraid, in particular because they notice other people look at them with mistrust, and that's not something they've experienced before. And about 30% of those actually experienced hearing people talk about Asian Americans in a racialized manner, either as direct insults or just as a racialized joke. And still, about 1/4 of Asian Americans are extremely concerned that there will be hate crimes happening to them or their loved ones. So what do you do when you belong in that population and these numbers also speak to you? It shouldn't be surprising for you that you may notice yourself having more concerns, having some symptoms. And that's something I want to talk about today, because there are a lot of limitations to what we can control in the world, And in fact, while the whole world seems to be so hyper-focused on how to shield ourselves from the virus, I have also become just as concerned and protective over mine and my family's mental health. And earlier, Dr. Liu also spoke to our immune system being impacted by our overall sense of energy, how restful we're able to get in the evenings, and also an overall sense of peace. That wellness will impact our physical immunity as well. So I hope to also bring about some awareness as to why is it that Chinese Americans underutilize mental health services, and how can you become more aware of what is happening to you? Because what we do know is that during COVID, or since COVID, Chinese Americans and Asian Americans overall have become more aware and reached out more to mental health services. And I noticed that as well in my private practice. I also want to talk a little bit about what you can do on a day-to-day basis to practice taking care of your mental health. And finally, while we're all hoping to go back to some form of life's normalcy, there is a lot of normalcy for us to maybe scrutinize, to question, and to further appreciate. So let's take a look at what this is. And do not be too alarmed if you notice any of these symptoms in yourself. Okay, so here we have 3 different categories. We have some physical discomfort, some bodily changes, and some cognitive changes. I'll talk about the physical discomfort first. Aches and pains in muscles or joints, is that common? Well, if you've been sitting in this conference for a while, you might feel that. So feel free to move around and stretch a little bit. Okay, but if this is something that takes place ongoingly for you, there's likely some inflammation happening for you. Likewise, if you notice pain in your chest or in your back, what could that be? Has it gone away? Is it habitual? Take note, maybe it's a symptom of something else as well. And do you frequently get headaches and migraines? Because what typically happens is we treat these as individual ailments and assume that they don't have a greater connection to other things. So if that's one category you experience, it's okay. But if you also experience these 2 other categories, such as some bodily changes, especially relating to sexual pleasure, okay, or your sex drive, or other things that used to bring you enjoyment but no longer does, or maybe a sense of restlessness, some agitation, or your appetite, namely how it affects as much as your weight change, whether it's gaining weight even though you're not changing how you're eating, or you're losing a lot of weight, whether or not you're changing the way you're eating. And then the third one, for our cognitive changes, are you noticing yourself getting distracted easily? Is it hard for you to make decisions? Are you finding yourself being forgetful? What do you think this is? Well, these are actually signs that potentially you may be experiencing clinical depression. Depression is not just about feeling sad. It comes with a variety of other symptoms. So this is something that I want to bring into your awareness. Now, clinically, if you're experiencing sadness and 5 of these symptoms for over 2 weeks, you already can be diagnosed as clinically depressed if you also meet other criteria. So this is important to take into consideration because this will also impact your overall immune system. Next, let's look at a different set of physical discomfort, bodily change, and cognitive changes. First, if you notice any increased heart rate, nausea, sweatiness, or maybe your digestive or bowel problems relating to physical discomfort, that's something to take note of. If there are individual things that you've been trying to address, but you can't see the root of it, then maybe you need to consider whether there is a pattern with that and bodily changes and cognitive changes. And with the bodily changes is an overall digestive and metabolic change, okay? Maybe some episodes of unspecific panic. And what that is, you don't really know where this fear is coming from or anxiety is coming from, but you experience as panic coming up from you, okay? So that's what we call a panic episode. Or you're noticing yourself feeling this impulse to have to do something, to maybe have to clean, to maybe have to shop, and you act out on those things compulsively. Okay, that's also something to take into consideration. But if you're also noticing that you tend to ruminate, okay, having repetitive thoughts over something over and over again, you can't get it out of your mind, or obsessing over something and you can't not hyper-focus on that thing in particular, or you notice yourself feeling easily irritated, And this may come out as being irritated at your family members, even though you don't need to be. When you have these 3 different categories of symptoms, I want you to consider that this is related to anxiety. Clinical anxiety is not just about worrying, but if you're worrying and you're finding yourself having 3 or more of these symptoms for over 6 months period of time, then ask yourself, maybe this is time for me to seek help, because having clinical anxiety also exacerbates other issues. So when should we seek help? Well, severity. What does severity mean? Well, you have a sense of whether or not you're still able to carry on everything it is that you need to do. Duration. Well, how long can you endure something? It's not about the longer you endure it, the stronger you are. And if you seek help, you're giving in. But actually, the longer you endure it, the longer you may be impacting your immune system and your family members, as well as your job performance. And when it comes to impact, what we evaluate is, are your symptoms impacting your relationships on a day-to-day basis? Are your work performance suffering? Or are other areas of performance also being impacted? So most importantly, we look at work and we look at your families or your relationships. Why should we be seeking help? Well, because to understand, our bodies are not just an individual entity that's just a bio entity, but we're somebody who has a body, but we have emotions, we have minds, we have souls, and we function in this world of relationships, in this world of context. So we contribute to the work that we do. We're also impacted by things we read, we learn, we consume, and the people we interact with. So we have this agency to make endless choices that are presented to us. That's within our freedom. But within our freedom, it also comes with responsibilities of what those choices will lead to. And what's interesting is, usually when I receive inquiries from Chinese Americans, they're not about them. They're about, oh, my mother, oh, my daughter, or my family member is suffering. Because I notice their severity of these different symptoms. It's been so long and it's really impacting me. So they're finding that their relationship with their loved ones are suffering, but the loved ones themselves may or may not be as willing to reach out. So I would like to raise your awareness to just check in with yourself, because to take care of yourself will also take care of other people around you. So let's consider a little bit of self-practice. So because of the recent, I think, awareness in Asian American racial incidents related to the onset of COVID-19, the latest American psychologist had a special issue just for Asian Americans. And in a particular, we see different models that talk about how to deal with the mental health illness issues that's coming up during this time in particular. And one of the models that's proposed is 3 parts, but I'm summing it up here in 2, okay? As simple as, what are we consuming and taking in? What are we letting in? Here, I invite you to begin your day by letting some natural light in. So whether it is opening your window, opening your curtain first thing in the morning, or stepping out and getting some air in, okay, getting some natural things flowing instead of reaching right away to your phone or turning on maybe LED lighting at home or checking your furnace. But get some fresh air if possible and get some natural lighting if possible. But also, as you're doing it, be mindful of what kind of information you're consuming. Are you following all these hate crimes incessantly? Are you following all the deaths and all the hospitalization rates on a daily basis? Or maybe are you following and checking in on how your family and friends are doing? What sort of things, daily things, normal things are they going through? And what are you doing to allow your energy to flow in terms of exercising, in terms of investing in your love and care? Okay. So overall, be mindful of consumption. And one of the things, a tripartite model that was proposed by some Asian American scholars from this special edition is that we need to first recognize that racism exists. And when we see acts of racism, we attribute that to racism. We don't attribute that to our skin color. We don't turn it inwardly, okay? But turn it outward, knowing that where it's coming from. So I would also recommend that we be mindful of what it is that we are bringing in. And then, of course, it also goes with what are we letting out? Well, do you really want to ask your spouse, gee, I don't know why, but every day I look at you and I just feel so irritated? Or would you like to tell a therapist that? I don't know why, but whenever I am speaking to my spouse, I just feel this irritation. I don't think it's them, but I feel irritated. And allow your therapist to help you explore what that is while minimizing some unnecessary discomfort or maybe upset from at home if you were to bring up that conversation at home. And also, are there some things that you need to let go of, even for a period of time, whether that is letting go of old normal, whatever that old normal may be, letting go of the idea that, if I just focused on working hard and pushing myself through, everything will be okay, because there's a lot that's beyond your ability. So we do have limitations. And once again, allowing that energy to flow involves letting some things go in order to create a void for something else to come in that is more positive of an experience. So not only should we be mindful of what it is that we're consuming, but we should also be mindful of what it is that we are investing our energy in, what it is that we're spending. What are you spending time on? Because those things matter. And here I want to bring your awareness to 3 different questions. Then the first one, as we consider what normalcy means, ask yourself, what were some things that were time-consuming, energy-consuming, but they were really mundane? Maybe the hour-long drive to work, maybe the infinite in-person meetings that we had to have. Were those things really necessary? Are they trivial? How are they eating away your life? The second question is, what are some things that are precious, but maybe we had oversight and we disregarded those things as not important, such as sitting down and having a meal with our family, washing our own dishes, okay, doing something at home for the sake of being at home and being with loved ones. And finally, how are those things really different, the mundane and the precious? If we can appreciate that some of the most ordinary things can be so extraordinary, then we will have achieved a deeper appreciation for normalcy. Thank you. I wish you health and wellness.